and the inside students, quite frankly, are just as apprehensive that it's all a conspiracy. They were really there to study them, and that, you know, we're not really there for all of the reasons I'm telling them that we're there, and they really don't have any desire for anybody to know who they are outside of that classroom. So it works for those reasons. And we'll talk a little bit how it gets a little bit unclear through the class. One of the things that I talk to when I meet with the inside students about is that really they can obviously say what they want, but I really encourage them not to talk about what they're there for. Because one of the primary purposes is to kind of to break down the barrier, basically, of us versus them, especially for future criminal justice professionals, that we are all human beings. Every single one of us in the room is a criminal, and that there's no way that we're going to start defining already from the beginning who, you know, Michael is by the type of crime he's been convicted of. And so we ask them that they not share those issues. Now it does come out, and I'll talk about how in a minute. And then we met for 2.5 hours, is the biggest chunk of time we could get at the prison because of counts, which is always a problem. We always run out of time, of course, in the class. And we meet in a weekly format, again, sitting like this, but mostly what we're doing in this role is kind of large group brainstorming discussions, and then breaking into small groups and doing working on the issues and bringing it to the larger group. One of the things that's very different in my experience being in the academy is that voice is literally equal, including mine. So one of the things that's constantly shifting in the class is where we're going in terms of the topics. So some folks were asking at lunch, you know, in terms of readers and things we choose, and of course I choose different readings and books and stuff, but it never fails that every week I'm making copies and trying to get different articles because the conversation has gone in a different place that I don't have in my little schedule for it to go. So they do create the space and the rules for dialogue. So it's in the first week of class, everybody is creating what are going to be our 10 rules, or however many rules they want to come up with for how we're going to communicate in this class. And it's very apparent early on, the university students, by the way, are much more likely to kind of defer to the inside students based on all of their expertise. And it's really fascinating what happens on the opposite end, because they quickly learn that the incarcerated students, just like them, are working full-time and have all of these other obligations other than this class. And yet they're the ones doing the readings, which for those of us in the academy know is always this issue with our university students. And so it kind of holds them to task that, oh my goodness, if I want to participate in this dialogue, I'm really going to have to do the readings and do the work. And they quickly become more comfortable because of the space that's shared and equal in voice, and it transcends. It really does come across for university students that they can say the things that they never thought they could say to somebody who's incarcerated, as long as they're not attacking a person and maybe criticizing an idea. It was a comfortable space to be in. So the ideas shift and the participation shifts, but one of the golden rules of everybody is there are no wallflowers in inside-out classes. Every single person is expected to participate in that dialogue because everybody has something to offer. Okay. They do a lot of writing, and of course everybody complained about the writing, and I would always mention to the university students, at least they can type their papers. They do weekly reflection papers to kind of get to taking the readings, doing observations of our group dynamics, analyzing, integrating, getting them to kind of critically think about the issues. And by the way, it becomes quickly apparent to the university students because they come in with the same idea that, oh, incarcerated folks know all of the issues of the entire system. And that's not the case. They have never, most of the incarcerated students have not been exposed to this kind of level of thinking about the system in which they're entrapped in. And so it's actually very, I think, freeing for them to talk about it in a way with a language that they hadn't been exposed to before. And then they do a final paper, but one of the big things that they do together is what's the group project. The last few weeks of class, they all work in small groups, and what we've decided people could opt to do this, we did it in this last year, is in the U.S. Senator Webb had introduced legislation for the National Criminal Justice Commission Act which essentially would establish, a blue ribbon panel to study all of these major problems for the 18 months of the system. And of course, I'm a little bit cynical about it because I don't think we need to study them. I think there's plenty of research out there to use, but it's a huge step and for the U.S. because there's bipartisan support. I mean, this thing's looking as if it's going to move and actually go into law. So what we did is each student took kind of an issue that he pointed out in that legislation, there was 5 of them, and worked on those issues. And they put together and compiled what they had learned in the class, but also through external readings that the outside students would get for them. And then looked at how do what we already know has happened and historically has happened, how do we shift and change policy, which is actually empowering for all students because they think, oh, here we go, we're going to talk about how horrible this system is, and there's nothing we can do, it's just always been like this. And in fact, there are some really great solutions, and I know, you all were getting on this reformist, abolitionist dialogue again, but there's some really practical solutions for what's going on currently prior to possibly getting to an abolition dialogue in the U.S. I mean, that dialogue just is not present in the U.S. So they focused on these 5 issues, and we compiled them, I compiled them, with a letter, cover letter, and what happened was I sent it to Senator Webb's office, but also every Inside Out class has a formal public closing ceremony where students are awarded their certificates of completion, of course with just their first name, but we invite lots of public officials, not just from the DRCs or the prisons or just universities, but also community-based groups, victims groups, judiciary groups, lawyers, all kinds of different folks to come into the prison. And it's, again, we sit in a circle and it's driven kind of by the students. They talk about their experiences. DRC talks about their experiences with the program. The media coverage was there, and it's much more getting to the broad base of education about what are some of the critical issues and what are some of the things folks need to know who even live in that same community and don't understand who's incarcerated in their back door. So that's what we do in that. Let's see. One of the things that, in addition, there's specific kind of benefits that are proposed for these Inside Out classes, and one of the things that I've been working on with the national group and also I'm piloting in Ohio is trying to test some of these assumptions that we all, you come away from this experience, and you hear from all the students of all these great things, but empirically we want to know, does it really happen in this way, and is it lasting for social change? Is it encouraging folks to become more engaged in their communities and encouraging them to become more engaged in social justice policy and advocacy. And so there's all of these different benefits folks talk about for the types of groups. Incarcerated students basically being able to understand some of the criminal justice stuff in their lives in a larger context, but all the way to folks always want to see something about outside when they get outside of prison, possibly building potential for not coming back and pursuing education and long-term career goals in a different way. For the university students, it's similar, but I just put up here a few of the Insight students I had them do for our final closing ceremony, just a general overall. I told them they could use a sentence, some of them obviously didn't listen to that direction, to kind of describe their reflection on the class. And some of it is getting this idea that they do have a sense of purpose, and some of what really comes across to me is how corrupt our education system is, in fact, especially in the U.S. based on class, race, and gender. Because most of what I'm not telling you is all the work that's going on behind the scenes to try to even get men who may have their GEDs up to reading and writing and being able to actually think that they can read and write at these levels. And some of them, their writing is absolutely profound, and of course nobody ever has told them that they could write anything